All right. Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute or two. We'll kind of let everyone filter in here. While you guys are entering, just a couple housekeeping things here, and we'll go over these a couple times. But a couple different ways to interact throughout this webinar. One being chat, one being Q&A. We do have a moderator that's going to help us with both chat and Q&A. But to kind of familiarize yourselves with that, if you're trickling in here, why don't you just let us know where you're joining us from in the chat? And also, if you would let us know kind of the one thing you're most excited to learn or hear about in today's webinar. So go ahead and jump in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from and one thing that you're really excited to learn or hear about today. Yeah, Brandon, great question. This is being recorded. We'll get those sent out to you guys here shortly after. I believe we should do that within the first 24 hours, but right in that time range. So great. See some Wisconsin, Georgia. All right. We're doing well in the chat. That's great. As you can see, when you guys are all chatting, it goes really fast. So second housekeeping item, as we let everyone else kind of funnel in here. If you have a specific question, you can definitely try and chat. But if there's a lot of chat going on, it may get buried. If you have a specific question, feel free to use the Q&A section, and we'll make sure that we get those answered for you, either in the moment or potentially at the end there of the webinar. So give it about 30 more seconds, and then we'll go ahead and get started again. If you're just trickling in, let us know where you're joining from and one thing that you're excited to hear about or learn about in today's webinar. See a few familiar names here joining us as well, so welcome. Greg's excited to learn about effective ways to communicate with crews. We've got some good nuggets there for you, Greg. Gary wanting to learn some skills with CompanyCam. I won't go super in depth on CompanyCam. I'm not here to pitch or sell, but we'll definitely give you some things there as well, Gary. Document projects better. You are definitely in the right spot, Carrie. We are going to do that. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm sure we'll have a few people trickling in, but looks like we got a decent number here. So thank you for joining us. I'm Michael with CompanyCam, and we're going to talk today about documentation and how documentation is money. And kind of the focus will be at the end of 3 ways that you can maybe squeeze a little bit of extra cash out of your job sites that maybe you're leaving on the table or not even knowing is a place where you can grab some extra cash from the jobs you're doing. So what we're going to cover, we're going to start with the value of documentation and communication. Why is that important? Those kind of things. I'm going to set the stage with the value, and then I'm going to put you on the spot and say, hey, do you have a documentation and communication process? We'll go over that quickly, and then we'll tie things together with 3 ways to squeeze money out of your jobs. So let's get started. First off, why is documentation and communication so important? I love this image because I think everybody's felt this at some point in time. No matter your role at a company, whether you're a salesman, production, crew leader, quality assurance, marketing, or oftentimes owner of a company, it's kind of that, oh my goodness, what is going on? And as a company, you're hitting multiple job sites a day. It's really easy to get lost in that information or almost create that information overload of, we know we need to be taking notes and photos and documenting our jobs, and we need to communicate that, but where is it at? And so if you've ever had that feeling of where is it at, or it's piling up, hopefully we're going to get you to where you don't have that as often, or hopefully at all, in the future. So everyone's got to be on the same page. That's why documentation and communication is so important in a contracting business. So how is the photo documentation and communication process going to help you? Lots of different ways, but I broke it into three kind of very important areas. Number one, coordinate with your crew. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's handoffs. Whether you recognize them as handoffs or not, there is a handoff from sales potentially to production potentially to quality control or quality assurance, the QA QC team potentially to marketing. And then at all points in there, you've got your management or your owners that are also getting handed information. So having a great communication and documentation process is going to help keep everybody coordinated and on the same page. Number two, thinking externally. Great communication and documentation is going to help you avoid customer disputes. We'll get into some of those cases, and depending on the trades you're in, I've got some examples. I talk to contractors on a daily basis, and I can probably hit some of those pain points where you felt Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith say, hey, you guys did this or you did that, and you don't have the documentation to prove if you did or you didn't do that. And then ultimately, we want to talk about the money aspect of things, and the time savings, because time is money. So we're going to get into those things when we get into our tips here shortly. I want to pause just a second. We'll give you another opportunity to use the chat feature. I'm just going to say 1 to 5. Just give me a number 1 to 5 on this question. If I said, hey, what is your documentation and communication process? 1 being myself and my team would be very unclear on what it is. 5 being we would all know that. So 1 to 5, how well do you and your team know your current documentation and communication process? As these are coming in, lots of 3s and 4s. Depending on our audience, I'm going to guess that we have a lot of owners in the room or in the audience here. When I do this in person, I love to offer a $100 bill up to all the owners that are in the room. And I say, okay, so you gave me a score. You can tell me pretty much what your documentation and communication process is. That's great. If I brought one of your team members in here and I said, I'll risk my $100 bill, you risk your $100 bill, how accurate are they going to be on matching yours? If they're accurate and they get it right, you get my $100 bill. Vice versa, if they don't get it right. Usually those 4s and 5s or 4.5s end up being, maybe I'm like a 2 or a 3. And those are important things to keep in mind, because oftentimes as an owner, you know what you want, you know how you want it, but most importantly, you have that process in your head and you know why you want it. So that's the look I usually get. Process? Yeah, maybe. Why your team may not be able to be completely on the same process with you usually has to do with that why, because you as an owner have a lot of whys. Why is it so important that we document and communicate on our jobs? And to create this process for documentation and communication, or to improve it. So a lot of you are in the like 2.5 to 4 range. So 2.5 to 4 range, not bad actually. So we'll use the word improve. how do we improve our process for documentation and communication? We need to drill down to the why and make sure that not just the owners or project managers know why, but everybody on your team understands why it's so valuable to take certain photos, to take certain notes. Why does your salesman need to adequately document I know I've got a concrete coatings company in here. Why does the salesman need to make sure they document the cracks in the concrete that you're going to be coating and how big they are and those kind of things? Well, that's important for your production team so that they're showing up with right materials, those kind of things. So really laying out the why in your process is very important. So why are we documenting? Make sure my team knows that. And the other big one to keep in mind with your documentation process is you will never take a photo or a note or any of those things, any piece of documentation for now. If I just need it now, I don't need a photo of it. I'm taking the photo and I'm taking the note for later, oftentimes for someone else. So keeping that in mind when you build out your process of, okay, so not only are we taking this photo and this note, but it needs to be clear because it's not going to be used today. It's going to be used in the future and it's going to be used by someone else. I'm sure you can all think of times where you have scrolled through your phone and see a photo and you say to yourself, I don't remember where I took that photo. I don't remember why I took that photo. There was some reason because I took it. I just don't remember. And so keeping those things in mind when you build your process. CompanyCam's done a lot of work with standard operating procedures. We have a documentation. We are a documentation tool. So obviously we have a lot of experience there. We've created an SOP. If you want to just pull your phones out, I'll sit on this slide for a second. This is going to take you right to the ability to download in a standard operating procedure. And what I love about what we have is you can edit it. You can make it your own. It's one of those things. Honestly, it's like me when I put these presentations together. I've got the layout of the slides from our marketing team. So we're 90% there. I just have to put that 10% extra in versus starting with a blank canvas. So this is kind of that 90% wireframe. It's laid out, it's structured. You can then just scan the QR code, go in and make it your own, make it fit for your team, making sure that you keep these things in mind, making sure the why is clear, making sure that why is communicated to your team, and making sure that you're thorough with your documentation, because again, you're not documenting for the moment, you're documenting for the future. So there that is. If you can't get this QR code to work or anything like that, let us know. We'll be able to get you a digital copy another way. So why we're here though, 3 ways to squeeze money out of jobs. I called them money squeezing documentation tips. So we're going to go into, and these are a couple of the things you guys said you were excited to hear about. We're going to talk about how to motivate our crews to document, how do we increase communication, and then how do we leverage documentation for future work. I think that's my favorite one. I think that's going to be probably the biggest takeaway or aha moments for some of you, is that leverage of your documentation that you're already doing or should be doing and getting future work with that. So let's jump into the first one here of motivating crews. When I think about this one, it's an interesting thing because I talk to contractors all day, every day. And sometimes, there's spiffs for taking the right photos, those kind of things. And I'm not here to say you should or you shouldn't do that. So when we talk motivate, I'm not talking from a financial standpoint. I do want you to keep in mind the why. Why are we documenting? I think that will help with the motivation. But the first thing goes back to that process we were just talking about. To motivate your crews, the process has to be simple. I think about, I was on a few job sites last summer, and they were roofing sites, and it is unbelievably hot and bright and tiring being on a roof in the middle of summer. And I wasn't actually even doing any of the roofing. I was just there observing, learning the trade. And it was awful. Like I couldn't wait to get off there, get into the truck, get some air conditioning, get some water. And so in your process, you've got to be thinking like, this has to be simple. I can't have this huge process that when my crew gets down from a roof or they get out of a crawl space or whatever trade you're in, that they have to go and then do something that's going to take them 30, 60, 90 minutes to get that documentation somewhere that we can use it. So the process has to be simple. The simpler the process, the easier the process for your crews to follow, the more they're going to be motivated to do that. An example I have is a contractor that we work with at CompanyCam could not get photos from their team at all. And when we dove into their process, they were using digital cameras. They would bring those digital cameras back to the physical office at the end of the day. They would take the SD or chip out and they'd put it in the computer, and then they would upload and move those photos. Awful process. They knew what they wanted to accomplish in their process. They knew why they had the process, but no crew was motivated to do that. That was something they dreaded at the end of the day. Thus, they would take the absolute bare minimum photos to get by. And once they changed their process, they started seeing that not only is our crew happier, but they're taking more photos. They're getting us those photos. So keep in mind, is our process simple? Is it something they can work with? Does it create efficiencies? I think about that handoff that I talked about earlier from potentially sales to production. What I can promise is if you have a great simple process that your salesmen are following and your production team is seeing their efficiency increase as a result, they're going to be thankful for the process. They're going to tell your salespeople, hey, really appreciate how you set the table for us on that job. Really made our jobs easier. So creating those efficiencies to where you're handing off from sales to production or production to marketing or whatever handoffs you have in your business, you're going to create that great team dynamic. You're going to see those efficiencies. And as that morale increases, as those efficiencies increase, naturally, you're going to see your team be more motivated to follow that documentation process. And then finally, motivate crews, reducing mix-ups or going back to sites. Owners that are with us right now, I would venture to guess that anytime you think about a mix-up where you have to have a callback or you show up with the wrong material or not enough material, any of those things, those are places where you're leaving a ton of money or wasting a ton of money and time, but there are also times where you're just wanting to pull your hair out because in your brain you're saying that shouldn't happen. We need to be setting our teams up, and so having a simple process that your crews are following is going to greatly reduce mix-ups or callbacks, those kind of things. And if you think about those from a financial standpoint, what does one callback cost you? I'm not here to get into that today, but I would challenge you to all think about that. So if we say, hey, how many callbacks are we averaging in a month? How much does one on average cost us? What if we can reduce our callbacks by 10% because of our process? How much money is that going to save us monthly? Or 15%, 20%, setting goals based around those mix-ups or callbacks. So motivating crews, number one, things to consider. Are there barriers or hurdles? Back to that story I was talking about where they were using digital cameras. Well, the barrier and the hurdle was the fact that they had to come back to the physical office. They had to spend extra time. They were probably tired. Definitely barriers, hurdles. Another one is, are you at the mercy of your team emailing or texting or sending photos digitally back to the office? Because if you are, that is a barrier because you don't have access to that documentation until they've taken that step. So at the end, we're going to talk about some ways to make sure that you don't have a barrier or hurdle like that. Lots of other barriers or hurdles. So just thinking about your process and saying to yourself, yeah, it may look great, but let me play devil's advocate. Are there barriers or hurdles that are preventing us from getting the end goal? And that's documentation. How do necessary parties get that documentation? So we'll talk here in a minute, but keeping in mind both internally and externally. Is it easy for all the people that need the documentation to access and get that documentation? And then, like I said, ask yourself, how much are callbacks and return trips costing you? And even if you can reduce that by a percentage, even a small percentage, it's going to save you a lot of money, big picture. So I would encourage all of you to start charting how many callbacks do we have, how many trips do we get to a job site, and then say, shoot, we have to run to the hardware store, we have to run back to the main office to get something that we didn't show up with. Even if that's once or twice, like, could the right process prevent that and save you that amount of time? So things to consider there. Motivating crews. Obviously, there's some definite areas where you are potentially leaving significant amounts of money on the table. And we're going to just increase those here as we go through the process here. Number 2 is increase communication. So this one's kind of a little bit more, you got to wrap your brain around increased communication and how are we going to save money here, or how are we going to make money here? Number 1, all departments are in the loop. So with great communication, great documentation, we're going to have all the necessary parties in the loop. They're going to know what's going on. That leads to those efficiencies that we were talking about. And then I want to dive into on the things to consider here. Easy third-party communication, and I'll get into what I mean there. But increased communication, getting all departments on the same page. Things to consider. Number 1, who all needs to be in the know? And I think sometimes this gets overlooked. You might say it's very obvious that from sales to production, obviously production needs to be in the know. They're the next ones there. But maybe we need to look 2 or 3 steps further down the road. So my salespeople maybe need to make sure that my marketing team is in the know right away. Hey, we've got a great project. It's going to turn out awesome. I just signed it. So making sure that everyone that needs to be in the know internally is in the know. And then back here, easy third-party communication. Well, what does that mean? So depending on your trade, if you're in any of the insurance trades, third parties, maybe your supplementing company, maybe a public adjuster, maybe an attorney, maybe the insurance carrier. How do I make sure that those people that I'm working with are in the know, have easy access to the materials that they need? Very important things. And then probably the most important third party is your client. And how do I make sure they're in the know of the process, where things are, all of those things? And I put down here pre-existing damages. So things to consider, that's the number 1. I don't care what type of trade you're in, pre-existing damages need to be documented. They need to be then communicated internally and obviously to the property owner or your client. So that's one to consider, but then that will hopefully help you get your brain kind of working and saying, here's some other things that my clients maybe need to know or that third parties need to know. If you have any good stories on pre-existing damages, I would love to hear those because I love sharing those in presentations just like this. But I've heard all sorts of awesome stories. My roofers always tell me about cracked driveways and damaged gutters and screens. Pretty much all of my outdoor contractors talk about they have rose bushes. There's something with rose bushes. They almost all have a story about a damaged rose bush that they did or didn't do, but were blamed by the homeowner. And so when you consider that, pre-existing damages need to be communicated up front versus on the back end, protecting yourself, saying, no, see, we do have documentation of that. It was already damaged. That's a great way to set the stage. I have one roofing contractor that actually will document ripped screens, and just offers to in their process say, hey, if you go in and go with us as your roofing contractor, you've got 2 screens. I don't know if you knew they were have little holes in them in the back, but we can go ahead and get those replaced for you while we're doing the roof as well. So almost turning that pre-existing damage and communication into a sales tactic versus saying, okay, I documented it, so if they do blame me for it, I can show them. Just being upfront with it. So thinking about that, making sure that pre-existing damage and documentation of that is in your process. Increase communication. So I've got a few screenshots here of text messages that I've gotten from contractors that I work with. I won't read through these verbatim. This one right here, though, I love the last one of, it says today at 7:16 a.m. Your inspection photos will show up here as we take them. Setting that stage of transparency from inspection number one. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, yeah, if your truck got hammered, your roof probably did as well. This is a hail incident. We have nothing to hide. We're going to communicate with you throughout this process. Here's a link in which you can see all of your inspection photos as we take them. Increase that communication piece and make it a part of your process from the very beginning. Here's another one. This one makes me laugh every time. I've put this in numerous presentations. I'm a homeowner. I'm not a contractor. And I love transparency. When I'm looking at somebody that's, providing me a service on either my property, my vehicles, whatever that may be, I love transparency. So I love the fact that they're putting photos out there and getting those in the hands of their clients. It's almost scary to think that in this case was so abnormal for this homeowner that he says, man, you're in animals. Like, holy cow, you're giving me these photos. It's in real time. This is the greatest communication ever. Almost sad to think that like, that's the expectation of like, you are amazing if you just share what you're doing with me as a homeowner. But that increased communication clearly goes a long ways. And here's proof of that. So increasing communication, extremely valuable when talking about that with clients. Leverage point, or number 3, leverage documentation. This is my favorite one. And I know a few of you talked about like the checklist feature that CompanyCam has. But leverage documentation, things to keep in mind: take lots and lots of photos, more photos, but make sure you have a reason behind why you're taking those photos. But take lots of photos. Think about using checklists for reviews. Again, back to my process. My salespeople go in and they say, hey, at the end of this job, we're going to take you through a 5-point or a 10-point or our 31-point checklist to make sure that we achieved what you as the homeowner expected from this job. And then when you're doing that, whether it's production, sales, quality control, whatever person does that in your company, you can go back, complete the checklist because you want that anyway. And then you can say, hey, looks like the checklist was completed. Here it is. Let's go over it together. Boom. You could even maybe complete the checklist together. What perfect time to leverage the documentation, in this case, a checklist, and ask for a review. Does everything show that it was completed to your standards, Mr. and Mrs. Jones? Yep. It was perfect. Awesome. Would you mind leaving us a review? So really, really easy way to just kind of step right into that review stage. I know that most contractors want reviews. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, how do I ask for those? And then leverage documentation. I have to be using it on my social media, on my website. I have to get it out there. I have to make sure people see the good work that we're doing. A review is documentation, or a form of documentation. Quotes are forms of documentation. So all things that you can be thinking about on your social media and your website. Things to consider: what marketing collateral are you not leveraging? And I've got some things that hopefully kind of trigger you to think about these things. But what's out there that you guys are taking photos of, taking notes on, that would be great marketing collateral, and you're just not leveraging it? Extremely satisfied clients are probably the biggest one that you're not leveraging. And you say, well, Michael, how do I know, or how does documentation play into this extremely satisfied client? Well, setting the stage right away with that communication and documentation, I promise, is going to lead to more happy customers than what you currently have. And you may have a ton of current happy customers. They're going to be more and happier because you're so transparent. And it just builds that rapport with clients, just saying like, hey, here's what to expect with us. Here's when you can expect us to be available. Here's the documentation you're going to get. Just being very clear with setting expectations up front. I love the saying of, you can't meet expectations that aren't set. And it's so true. You as a contractor you're never going to meet you're never going to meet expectations that haven't been set. And so it's really important that in your initial process, especially when it comes to documentation and communication probably is the biggest, that you set that and say, hey, this is what you can expect from us from communication. So how do I leverage these things in social media? Here's a great one: before and afters. And there's a lot of different ways to accomplish getting before and afters. I'm not here. This isn't a CompanyCam sales pitch, but if you're using CompanyCam, make sure you leverage before and afters. In my opinion, every single job is an opportunity to create at minimum one before and after. Probably should be creating multiple before and afters on those jobs, and then take it that next step. So you have it, you can put it on Facebook. Here's the proof that it works. This is actually the first time I spoke at an event talking about before and afters. And I said, hey, make sure you're doing these, whether it's in Pick Stitch, CompanyCam. Obviously I'm biased, should be in CompanyCam, but I don't care where you're creating these before and afters, but create them and thank your homeowners with them. And I was in Chicago. I said, this is a new feature, you should try it. This is Central Roofing, Will Bates, and he did it. And he messages me and he's like, hey, Michael, I did it. I hope it works. So you can see me, I put a couple emojis there, but then I messaged him privately and I said, hey, great job, but you forgot to tag the homeowners. So he does tag the homeowners. You can see there's some comments there. There's 157 interactions, which is pretty solid. The number that floors me, and I would challenge you to, after this, go look at your own Facebook accounts and see how many of your posts have organically gotten 9 shares, because this has 9 shares. That's a really impressive number. That gets you out in front of 9 new audiences potentially. So again, what are you not leveraging that's there? Well, every job has a before and every job has an after. Make sure we create some sort of before and after showing the great work we did. And if nothing else, thank your homeowner. One other example, I didn't put a slide in here for this, but I do have a contractor in South Dakota that every single Friday morning, they go through, they take one of these before and afters, they save it, they send it to CVS or Walgreens or one of those print shops and print off postcards. They go and pick them up. They get back to the office and they write a handwritten thank you on every one of these postcards and leave them with the front desk, and they get mailed out thanking all of their jobs that they had done that week. And when I first heard that story, I said, I don't know, that seems like a terrible idea. Like I'm probably just throwing that away. And I and as nice as I could, kind of asked this contractor, and they said, yeah, I assume 95% of those are getting thrown away. But he said, I expect probably almost all of them get read. And he's like, at the end of the day, my goal is to thank my customer. And he's like, so if 95% at least get read and then thrown in the trash, I accomplished what I wanted. I thanked my customer. He said, but where do you think that other 5% go? And I was like, oh, probably on the fridge. That's where, if mail doesn't get thrown away at our house, it goes on the fridge or in a basket. He's like, exactly. And he's like, so now it's organic marketing on that person's fridge for me, reminding them of the great work that I did. And I said, brilliant. Your goal is to thank them. And as a result, you may end up getting some organic marketing out of it. So leverage your documentation. Create those before and afters on every job. Make sure, now we're going to transition from social media to website. Make sure you are up to date with images on your website. No stock images, number one, none. But leverage the documentation you have. Make sure you're showing the jobs that you've done. This is CompanyCam's showcase widget that you can put on your website. Not saying you have to use CompanyCam or CompanyCam showcase widget, but make sure that you have an easy way, or at least a process, to take jobs that you've completed and get them on your website so that you constantly have new and updated content on your website. Show off the work you've done. Here you can see what type of job it was, what products were used. You can see roughly where it was at. Fort Myers. These are all from Fort Myers. So just a really, really easy way to get documentation to your website. A couple more things here, and then I promise I'm seeing the chat, and I will dive into some of those questions here as well. Documentation must-haves. Polaroid camera is not one of those must-haves. So documentation must-haves. Number one, it has to be real time. And when I say real time, make sure you don't have a bunch of hurdles in that real-time solution. So I'm going to use the contractor I talked about that used digital cameras. And he's like, yeah, it's real time. Every night I have everything. It's like, that's not real time. That's hoping that your team comes in at the end of the day and now you have it at the end of the day. Real time is the ability to be on a job site, take your photos, take your notes, communicate that over, hopefully with as few barriers as possible. So I would say max one barrier: text message, email. That would be the absolute highest number of barriers I would think you would want in your process. Obviously, a solution like CompanyCam, you take your photos, they're automatically going to be sent to the cloud and available in real time. So don't even have the hurdle of email or text of those. Number two, easy to find and share. Again, back to when we were talking about, you don't take photos, you don't take notes for the moment. You take them for the future at some point in time. You need to be able to easily find those photos and share those photos. I met with a contractor last night, actually. They were trying to find some photos in their phone, and they were just in their camera roll, and they just scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. The share part was probably there. If they found them, it would be easy to share them from their camera roll. They couldn't find them. So make sure your solution is real time and that you can easily find and then share that documentation when you need to. Make sure that multiple people have access to it. Obviously, in the tough job market that we're in, turnover is a real thing. So making sure that you can, have access to that if your crew decides, hey, I'm no longer going to work here, that you don't lose all of their documentation with their phone that goes with them. And finally, buy-in. That process is so mission critical to this whole thing. You could take every single thing from start to finish that we just went over. And if your process isn't in place and you don't get that initial buy-in from your team, everything else is going to fall flat. So go back to the process, make sure that you look at it, go over it, improve it. Make sure you get those whys communicated to your team, help them get the buy-in. Whys is so important that we document where we have to take a piece of equipment. Well, it's important because maybe plywood is needed to get that equipment from point A to point B. And if we don't document that as a salesperson, then when our production team gets there to do the job, they don't have the necessary supplies and they have to go get those, and it takes time. So just making sure that you have all of those whys in your process will increase the buy-in. I'm going to wrap it up with, so how does all of this equal cash? A little show me the money meme there. Money, money, money. Three things. There's a lot of things. Number one, eliminate callbacks or disputes. I think all contractors would cringe at both of those, callbacks or disputes. Not something you want to have a lot of, and great documentation is going to reduce that. I guess I probably should put reduce callbacks and disputes there, because there's no silver bullet. You're never gonna eliminate them completely, but if we can reduce that number even by 10, 15, 20%, that's a ton of money on the bottom line of your company's P&L. Number two, great customer service and experience. The better your customer service and experience is, the more referrals you're going to get, the more reviews you're going to be able to acquire. Just going to pay dividends immensely on that. And so little things that may not seem like a big thing, like a sharing of a link to here's all the real-time photos that we're going to take as we do this job. Those little things may end up really wowing a customer. And then that customer goes and says to their friends, hey, check this out. This is really awesome. This is the experience I had with XYZ contractor. And then finally, marketing collateral library. There's money there. Every job you're doing, you should be thinking about, how are we going to market this job? This job is going to be done really well. It's going to be done great. And what steps do we need to take in our documentation process to make sure that we have marketing collateral from this job, so that we can use it on our social media, so that we can get it onto our website? So some of those things that I showed that were CompanyCam specific, obviously, I didn't get too into the weeds on those. At the conclusion of this webinar, if you're not using CompanyCam and you would like to have somebody reach out to you, I'm going to have a pop-up come there that will basically, you'll be able to put your phone number in, and one of our product specialists can give you a call, answer any CompanyCam specific questions that you have. I'm happy to answer those CompanyCam specific questions right now as well, if you have some of those, or if you just have general questions on documentation, communication, would be more than happy to do that as well. So I'll try to kind of scroll through the chat, but if you have questions that you for sure want answered, I have the Q&A portion pulled up right here on my other monitor. So feel free to jot those questions right now, and I'll try to scroll through chat here and see if I can find any outlying questions as well. So really appreciate you guys joining us, but if you have questions, please drop those in. Detailed explanation on CompanyCam Showcase. Yeah, absolutely. So really what it is the line of code that will be placed on your website. I'm not a website person, but if you've created your own website or you have a third party that does that, it's really simple. You take that line of code, you paste it into your CompanyCam's website, and then you get, just go back to it here really quick. You get this look. So this is the look that you'll have right there in your website. Really clean, really easy. And you can go in and detail project types, products used, and all sorts of great stuff there. Those are then published straight from your CompanyCam account. So you can go in and say, this is a great project for us. I want to publish this to my website. And instead of having to download a bunch of photos and upload those photos, it's just seamless. I want to publish these straight from my CompanyCam account. I will tell you, as a homeowner, I would encourage giving some nice details on your projects, which you can do in this. I would also encourage you to maybe show some of your better or best products used. So that way, Mr. Homeowner, myself, that lands on your website, I can say, well, I see you did that exterior painting using Benjamin Moore. You maybe mentioned some feature that Benjamin Moore paint had that made it great for that job, that maybe helps me upsell myself into that piece or particular product without you having to do that as a salesperson. So really easy. If you want to get that installed, if you don't have CompanyCam, obviously start that free trial, which we can do with our product specialists. If you have CompanyCam, reach out to your support specialist, or your success manager, I guess would be the right word there. And they can help you get that installed. So Joshua, hopefully that answers your question there. Jeffrey, labeling pictures such as what room? Yeah, so um, that's a feature that CompanyCam has. I would encourage that. I don't know that it quite makes my must-haves, but I think that's right there on probably those must-haves with your documentation of being able to say what the photo is of. If you take the photo in CompanyCam, you're going to be able to go in and add a tag to a specific photo and say this is bedroom one. You would also be able to go in and add a label to an entire project. So labels would be used to say maybe water damage or exterior painting job, so that you could get the whole job. Tags are used for specific photos, so you could say, hey, this is bedroom one, water damage. That way you can go and filter later on and say, well, I need to see bedroom one photos. There they all are. So that's how you can tag and label within CompanyCam. See if there's anything else. While I'm scrolling here, this is kind of last call for questions. If you don't have any at the moment, really appreciate you guys joining us today. If you have some that come up later on, feel free to reach out to us. Be more than happy to get those answered for you. But again, thank you for coming. Hopefully you got a couple pieces of golden nugget or a couple golden nuggets from this that you can go and at least improve or look at your current process. So really appreciate it. And we will be back, I believe, next month. And we're going to talk about your tech stack. So we'll talk about kind of how do you put a tech stack together? How do you choose technology to fit in your business and solve your business's problems? So really appreciate you guys joining us, and we will see you next time.